I'm a little rusty with the old talking to the camera. This is fine. It's fine. You're doing great, sweetie. Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Erin. This is Book Gal Erin, my channel. I'm gonna talk about books that I read in the past year that I think that deserve more hype. I've picked ones that haven't got as many ratings on Goodreads, and I think they deserve to be read a lot more because I really enjoyed them. I thought about making like a top 10 books of 2021, but I find it really hard to pick favorites. Like, if I just want to go based on rating, like sometimes I look back on a book and I remember loving it, but then I've only given it 4 stars, so I don't know, I can't go based on like ratings, and like, day by day I'd pick a different favorite. So we're just, no one's holding a gun to my head saying, you have to make a video about your top favorites of the year. No one's doing that. You can peruse my Goodreads, it's down there if you're very curious, but it's just me being like, you gotta make a video, you gotta do that. So this is the compromise. We're just gonna talk about books I read in the last year that deserve more. Okay, so the first book that I am dying to discuss is Terminal Boredom by Izumi Suzuki. So this is a book of short stories that are science fiction, and they're all pretty, have a pretty dark bent. They're kind of like, they're what I love about sci-fi when it's kind of philosophical and it sort of focuses on like the humanism in the story. So it's like very character-based, character-driven, but then there's all these weird little futuristic sci-fi elements going on that keep it pretty fresh and interesting. So I went into reading this not knowing much about it other than it's translated, it's a Japanese author. And I went into it knowing that they were going to be, weird, quirky stories, and that's it. But I thought it was written like recently, within the past couple years or so, like when it was, because it only like just came out in English. So I was reading these stories and I was like, wow, these have got such a quirky, old school sci-fi vibe. Like, it feels like these could have been written like ages ago, but yet the topics in them are so relevant to today. So I was like going through it, I was thinking like, yeah, what a nice quirky way to like have like your author voice sounding so retro. That's such a cool thing. Like there's a lot of stories that reminded me of like Philip K. Dick. There was one story that sort of felt a bit more like Kurt Vonnegut. But without like any like problematic elements that you get with sort of old school male sci-fi writers. So I just like went through it thinking that they were new stories written in an old-timey way, and then I get to the ends of the book and I read like the blurb, like the author blurb on the back, and it says Izumi Suzuki 1949 to 1986, and I just think like, oh my god. That's why I was so confused. Damn. So it's really like just a testament to show how, like, these were written in like the 70s and 80s, but they feel very fresh and new, and like a voice I'd never read from before. It's kind of devastating that she passed away so long ago, because I would have like loved to have read what if she had continued writing. She could have been like a powerhouse. And I did like a bit more research into her backgrounds. Like if she was still alive today, she would be the same age as like Haruki Murakami. So like she could have been like an icon like that. But yeah, tragically she took her own life shortly after finishing the story, Terminal Boredom. So that's pretty sad. but I think that more people need to read this and see what she had to say, because I think that her voices are really valuable. There's not that many female sci-fi writers from that time period, and this is just like a really valuable, unique perspective to read from. Yeah, so I think that the final story in the collection, called Terminal Boredom, was the best one in there. So it's about like people who there's not enough work going around, like people are just constantly distracted by like TV and stuff, which felt like it could have been written about like the last couple of years. Yeah, highly recommend that one. There was just a couple stories in there which I didn't really vibe with. But so there's 7 stories, so I loved 5 out of the 7, which is pretty good. Yeah. So this one is Terminal Boredom by Izumi Suzuki. Highly, highly recommend you read it. Yeah, I'll continue on with another collection of short stories which I loved, which came out this year. Came out in 2021, not this year. It's 2022 now. So this one is called Hold Your Fire by Chloe Wilson. This is an Australian author, and this is her first book of short stories. I think she's written some poetry collections in the past. I actually read this, I only discovered this book through the library, like I have through the library app that I've been using during lockdown. But then I loved it so much that I got a copy. My friend got me this for my birthday. Yeah, so what are these collections about? These are like dark, gothic, but contemporary stories. It's sort of about, each one is sort of about a person who maybe doesn't quite belong in the place that they've found themselves. The characters are quite like gritty. Some of them are like, they're not perfect characters. They might be flawed or unlikable, but they're so interesting. Like, I just want to keep reading. So good. It's kind of like, and the author describes her writing style as trying to be like a cross between a Tessa Moshfegh and Shirley Jackson, and that is a winning combination in my opinion. Yeah, and my favorite story out of the lot is called Harbor. So Harbor is about 2 girls, they're half-sisters, and they go to this wellness retreat on an island. And it's like probably the most like horror of the stories, maybe. But yeah, I just thought it was so good. Very dark, gothic, weird. Love this book. Yeah. Okay, so continuing on with horror and dark and weird, the next book I want to talk about is The 20 Days of Turin by Georgio Di Maria. So this one is another translated work. This one's Italian, and it was written in the 70s and only recently translated, I think a couple years ago. I want to say 2017 maybe. And I just think that it is just the most unique sort of horror story that I've ever read. So this book is about an unnamed narrator who is investigating events that happened prior to the start of the book, called The 20 Days of Turin, which was basically this period of like hysteria in the town where people would be out sleepwalking, and there were some violent attacks that had happened, and it was all sort of around this other related event, which was that there was this library set up where people could trade in like their handwritten diaries and journals into this sort of library type of thing, which people could then like take out other people's diaries and read them, and then like pay to find out who wrote the diary. And like there was like people were like, oh, it'll be great, people make like build communities and make friends this way, but like it just really showed like the sordid look into the minds of people in this city. And yeah, so like people have said like it's amazing, like he sort of predicted like anonymous like internet culture, but like back in the 70s before the internet was a thing, which is impressive. So it says here it's an allegory inspired by grisly neo-fascist campaigns of its day. So there's a whole bunch of like meanings and like metaphor that you can read into, but even without knowing that context, because I'm not Italian and I wasn't alive in the 70s, so I really don't know that much about that, but I think it stands on its own as a really compelling horror story. There's there's sort of dark forces at work, monster type things going on. I thought the ending was really quite abrupt, but I still think back on it and think like, wow, that's like a freaky ending. If that was like, a horror movie, it would have been like imagining the scenes in your head, you're like, oh, that's creepy. That's creepy as hell. But there's also kind of elements of like humor to it. Like you can even find that in like horror movies where a character does something that you wouldn't expect them to do. Like it's like, I can't believe they did that. Like, yeah, I don't want to give anything away, but yeah, if you enjoy horror, I strongly recommend you pick this up. I think more people need to read this. Yeah, and then the next one I want to talk about, it's more of a fun one, and it's very quick, short little book. It's called God, I Feel Modern Tonight, Poems from a Gal About Town by Catherine Cohen. So Catherine Cohen's a comedian in New York City, and she's written all these quirky little poems. They're sort of like for anyone that enjoys like meme humor type of thing, sort of like all about being a young woman, being a gal about town. And I thought this was like a really fun thing to read whilst being in lockdown. And I'm really getting into like being a comedy nerd, so and I find like poetry to be like kind of overwhelming to like, where do I start? I don't read a lot of poetry. So this was like a nice little way to dip my toes into reading some poetry, and having a giggle. This is just a really cool book of poems, and I think more people need to read it. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so the last book, and I don't have a copy of it here because I read it on my library app, and it's not a new release either. It's a classic, so probably a fair amount of people have read this, but it's not like talked about. Like no one on BookTube told me to read this one. I just, picked it up just because I was interested in reading some more Australian-based horror. So this book is called, I'll put it here, Picnic at Hanging Rock, by Joan and Lindsay. So this one was written in like the 60s, and it's set in like the 1900s, which is crazy thinking that like now the 60s are long enough ago, like that's the same amount of time. Like us writing about the 60s is the same as her writing about the 1900s, which is, yeah, so why should you read this classic? Like I think, like for a classic, it's pretty easy to read. It's not too overwhelming with like old-timey language. Not that it's really like super duper old, but I think it's like an accessible read. I think it's got something for everyone. It's like a mystery at its core. It's the girls who disappear on this rock. That's not a spoiler. You should probably at least know that that's what it's about. And that happens at like the start, and then it just deals with like the aftermath of, after these girls disappear. And it's just like the atmosphere alone is just like so perfect. So spooky, so dreamy, so whimsical. So I really, really enjoyed it just for that. And then I also read like So there was like a secret chapter that got left off the book, like at the publisher's request. They thought it would have more broad appeal without this final chapter to the book. But then that was released like in the 80s after Joan and Lindsay passed away. So I read that too, and I don't know. If you like realism, don't read the final chapter. If you like, if you're a fan of like Jeff Vandermeer, kind of weird style, dark stuff, I think your experience of reading Picnic at Hanging Rock will only be enhanced. It doesn't like solve the mystery, but it definitely pushes it in a certain direction. But there's still plenty to sort of analyze and think about. Yeah, Joan Lindsay was like sort of like a weird thinker. Like she sort of likes a timey-wimey sort of like I think she was sort of into like time and physics and stuff. Like so it's kind of it's like a very light sci-fi vibes in a way. I don't know. It just ticked a lot of boxes for me, and it was like probably the most like surprising book. Like I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. It's so Australian, like it's super Australian. So I really found that like to be a joy. It was a joy to read. Yeah. So yeah, those are the books that I wanted to talk about. My recommendations. Books that I think need more love and more people reading them in 2022, maybe, you know, give them a read. Yeah, like what else? It's like going forward into 2022, I'm probably gonna try and read a lot more short story collections. I'm reading one at the moment, which is awesome, called The Dangers of Smoking in Bed. I'm like halfway through, flying through it. So good. Yeah, and I think another like lesson that I want to take into 2022 is trying to hone in on the books that I like to read, and not just try and read books that I think will have like more clout, or because I think other people will be like impressed by it. There was a couple of books last year, and I didn't want to make a video about like books I hated, and have a big long rant. But there were a couple of books where I read them just because I thought they sounded cool, and would give me like book clout, and I didn't like them. And you know, who gives a shit what I read? That like, don't read books because you think they are cool. Read books because you think you will like them. Simple as that. That's my bookish resolution for this year. Yeah, so that's this video. I don't know when I will make another video. I'll make one when I feel like it. I could make one about all the books that I bought during lockdown, like, and all the physical books that I've bought and have to read. Usually I would just buy books like a couple at a time and like read them, put them on my shelf, but I bought a new bookshelf so I could fill it with more books, so I've got like I got like a big stack of books that I need to read. So I might do a video just showing the stack. Or maybe a bookshelf tour, maybe. Yeah, let me know if there's anything you're dying to see. And I might be more inclined to do it. Yeah, so that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment if you've read any of these, or if they sound good to you, or if I'm too niche. If this was too niche of a video, too obscure, that's possible. Don't be mean to me. Yeah, bye.